15 weird vintage tractors you won't believe existed. Some tractors were built to work, others were built to prove a point, and a handful were so strange that people stopped dead in the middle of a field just to watch them roll by. Today, we're counting down 15 of the most bizarre tractors ever bolted together. We're talking machines with steel screws instead of wheels, a tractor with a jet turbine under the hood, and 2 complete tractors joined into one. If you love old iron and the wild ideas behind it, take a second right now and hit that subscribe button, because this is exactly the kind of stuff we dig into on this channel. Every single week. All right, let's get into it. Number 15, the Doe Triple D. At first glance, the Doe Triple D looks like 2 tractors that rear-ended each other and somehow decided to make it permanent. And honestly, that's not far from the truth. In the late 1950s, a farmer named George Pryor was working heavy clay ground in Essex, England, and no tractor on the market had the pull he needed. Big 4-wheel drives simply didn't exist yet. So he took 2 Fordson major tractors, removed the front axle from the rear unit, and hinged them together nose to tail with a turntable coupling. The local dealer, Ernest Doe & Sons, saw the genius in it and put a refined version into production as the Doe Dual Drive, which everyone just called the Triple D. The result was around 100 horsepower and full 4-wheel drive in an era when most British tractors made half that. The operator sat on the rear tractor and ran both engines at once with linked throttles and clutches, while hydraulic rams swung the front unit through the turns, letting the whole rig nearly fold in half. The downsides were exactly what you'd expect. 2 engines to fuel, 2 of everything to service, and a price to match. Only a small number were ever built, with owners' clubs putting the figure at roughly 130, which makes a surviving Triple D one of the true holy grails for collectors today. Number 14, the Fordson Snow Motor. Now picture a Fordson tractor with its rear wheels stripped clean off and replaced by 2 giant steel screws, like something ripped straight out of a pulp science fiction magazine. That was the Fordson Snow Motor, a conversion kit developed in the 1920s by Armstead Snow Motors. Those huge helical drums spun in opposite directions, biting into packed snow and ice and threading the machine forward the same way a bolt threads into wood. Where ordinary wheels would just spin helplessly, the Snow Motor glided along like it owned the winter. A famous promotional film from the mid-1920s shows one of these conversions hauling loaded sleds through deep snow, crossing frozen ground that would have swallowed any wheeled machine whole. The pitch was aimed at mail carriers, country doctors, and loggers working snowed-in forests, and on paper it was pure genius. The problem was everything that wasn't snow. On bare ground, those screws tore up whatever they touched. The kit was expensive and bulky to install, and it was only useful a few months out of the year. When rubberized tracks and half-track conversions came along, the Snow Motor quietly faded away. Only a handful were ever sold, but if you ever find footage of one in motion, I promise you'll watch it twice. Number 13, the Big Bud 747. There's Big, and then there's the Big Bud 747. Built in 1977 by the crew at Northern Manufacturing in Montana, it's widely regarded as the largest farm tractor ever built. We're talking nearly 28 feet long, tires standing about 8 feet tall, and a working weight of over 100,000 pounds when fully ballasted. It was custom ordered for deep ripping on a California cotton operation, where the ground needed to be torn open several feet down, and nothing on the regular market came close to the job. At its heart sits a 16-cylinder Detroit diesel 2-stroke, originally rated around 760 horsepower, with later upgrades reportedly pushing it well past 900. Hooked to a cultivator up to 80 feet wide, the 747 could swallow acres in minutes. And here's the strange part. For all its size, it's a remarkably simple machine. Most of its components are just enormous versions of standard tractor parts, and owners have said over the years that it's surprisingly easy to maintain and no fuss to operate. It still exists today, still runs, and still draws crowds wherever it's shown. Standing next to it, photos simply don't prepare you. It remains rolling proof that if an American farmer can dream it, somebody in Montana will build it. Number 12, the Minneapolis-Moline UDLX comfort tractor. In 1938, Minneapolis-Moline asked a question nobody else was asking. Why should a farmer freeze on a steel seat all day and then still need a separate car to drive to town? Their answer was the UD comfort tractor, and it looked like a tractor and a sedan had a baby. Fully enclosed steel cab, sloped automotive-style grille, swept fenders, chrome trim, the works. Inside, you got a heater, a radio, windshield wipers, a dome light, a cigarette lighter, and even a passenger seat. The sales pitch was simple. Plow all week, then wash it off and drive the family to church on Sunday. Because on the road, the UDLX could reportedly hit around 40 miles per hour, which was unheard of for farm equipment. So why don't we all farm in one? Price. The Comfort Raptor cost roughly twice as much as a comparable Bear tractor, and this was the tail end of the Great Depression. Farmers admired it, then bought the cheap one. Only around 150 were ever built, and the model was gone within a few years. The punchline is that Minneapolis-Moline was simply 40 years early, because today, every modern tractor has the cab, the heat, and the radio. Surviving UDLXs are now among the most collectible tractors in America, with restored examples reportedly trading for well into six figures. Before we roll on to number 11, let me ask you one quick favor. The numbers show that most of you watching right now aren't subscribed yet, and if these old machines mean something to you, that button is the single easiest way to keep this channel plowing ahead. It takes 1 second, costs you nothing, and it genuinely makes a difference to us. Thank you to everyone who does. Number 11, the Little Bull tractor. In 1914, the Bull Tractor Company out of Minnesota dropped a bombshell on the farm equipment world. A real gasoline tractor priced at just $335, at a time when many machines cost several $1,000s. They called it the Little Bull, and it looked as odd as it was cheap. It rode on just 3 wheels with a single guide wheel up front and 2 wheels at the rear. And here's the part that raises eyebrows. Only one of those rear wheels was actually powered. The other was essentially along for the ride, an idler that could be adjusted to keep the machine level with one side running down in the furrow. With roughly 5 horsepower at the drawbar and 12 on the belt, it wasn't much, but the price made it irresistible. And for a short stretch, in 1914, the Little Bull was reportedly the best-selling tractor in America. Then reality showed up. Owners reported overheating, weak gearing that wore out fast, and that single-driven wheel clawing sideways whenever the ground got tough. The company burned bright and collapsed within just a few years. The Little Bull stands as one of farming's great cautionary tales. Cheap and clever isn't always the same thing as good. Number 10, the Steel Mule. The name alone tells you the mission. Replace the flesh and blood mule with a machine that never gets tired. The Steel Mule came from the Bates Machine and Tractor Company in the 1910s, and it was one of the strangest looking rigs of its era. Early versions paired a conventional front axle with crawler track drive at the rear, a half-mechanical, half-tank appearance that drew curious stares wherever it showed up. Later models refined that half-track layout, giving farmers serious grip in mud and soft ground while keeping soil compaction down. But the truly bizarre part was in the advertising. Period promotions claimed a farmer could operate the Steel Mule from the seat of the implement being towed behind it, using extended controls, essentially driving the machine the way you drive a team with reins. The whole idea was to make the switch from animals to iron feel as painless as possible. With gasoline engines generally in the 10 to 30 horsepower class depending on the model, it was compact enough for smaller farms, yet surprisingly capable on the pull. Track maintenance demanded diligence, and spare parts got harder to find once Bates merged with other companies, but plenty of farmers swore by their Steel Mules. Today, it stands as a perfect bridge between the horse-drawn era and everything that came after. Number 9, the Linn Halftrack. Some machines refuse to pick a category, and the Linn Halftrack is one of them. Built in upstate New York starting around 1917, it was part truck, part tractor, and part crawler, all welded into one stubborn hauler. Up front sat a conventional truck-style axle with wheels that could be swapped for skis when winter hit. Out back ran a pair of full crawler tracks that spread the weight and clawed through mud, snow, and swamp like nothing else on the market. The look was pure business. A tall truck cab and cargo bed perched over that strange wheel and track combination, like somebody had grafted the front of a delivery truck onto the back of a bulldozer. And the customers loved it for exactly one reason. It went where nothing else could. Logging outfits across the northern woods used Linns to haul timber out of camps that had no roads at all. Towns used them to plow and pack snow roads, and contractors dragged freight and equipment across ground that would bury an ordinary truck to the frame. They weren't fast, and they weren't pretty, but owners report they simply refused to quit. Production carried on for decades before winding down around the early 1950s, and surviving Linns are prized workhorse relics today. Number 8, the versatile D100. The versatile D100 isn't bizarre because it was exotic. It's bizarre because it was almost aggressively ordinary, and that ordinariness changed farming. In 1966, Versatile of Canada introduced the D100, an articulated four-wheel drive tractor rated around 100 horsepower and built largely from proven, off-the-shelf components. A straightforward 6-cylinder diesel, truck-style driveline parts, and a bare-bones frame with no cab and no frills whatsoever. It honestly looked like something a talented neighbor had welded up in his shop over the winter, and that was exactly the point. At the time, four-wheel drive tractors were low-volume, hand-built machines that cost a small fortune, strictly rich farm territory. The D100 hit the market at a price reported around $10,000, a fraction of what competing four-wheel drives commanded, and suddenly the average grain farmer could actually afford one. Everything on it could be serviced with common tools and common parts, which farmers understood and trusted. It sold, it put versatile on the map, and it forced the major brands to take affordable four-wheel drive seriously. Plenty of tractors on this list were strange dead ends. The D100 was strange in the best possible way, a plain, honest machine that quietly rewired the entire industry. Number 7, the Rumely Oil Pull. From around 1910 into the early 1930s, Advanced Rumely of Indiana built a machine that broke one of the most basic rules of engine design. It didn't use water to cool itself. It used oil. The reasoning was clever. Oil can run far hotter than water without boiling, and a deliberately hot engine could burn cheap, low-grade kerosene cleanly instead of pricier gasoline. In regions where gasoline cost real money, that math won a lot of farmers over. You could spot an oil pull from a mile away thanks to the giant rectangular cooling tower standing up front like a chimney, with exhaust gases pulled through it to draw the airflow. Add in a slow-turning 2-cylinder engine with a flywheel the size of a dinner table, and the whole thing looked and sounded like a rolling piece of industrial architecture, thumping across the field with that unmistakable slow bark. Owners loved the straightforward construction and the rugged, continuous pulling power for plowing, threshing, and hauling. Eventually, lighter and cheaper tractors passed it by, but the oil pull remains one of the most iconic machines of the entire transition, from steam power to internal combustion, and collectors still fire them up at shows just to hear that sound. And hey, if you've stuck with me through 9 of these oddballs already, you're clearly my kind of viewer, so do me a favor and tap that like button before we head into the final 6, because it tells me you want more deep dives exactly like this one, and it helps the channel more than you'd think. Number 6, the Ransomes MG tractor. Everything so far has been big, heavy, or loud. Number 6 is the opposite, and that's exactly what makes it strange. In 1936, the British firm Ransomes, Sims & Jeffries, a company better known for plows and lawnmowers, introduced the MG, short for motor garden. It was a genuine crawler tractor, with proper steel tracks like a miniature bulldozer, except the whole machine was barely bigger than a garden cart and weighed well under a ton. Power came from a small, single-cylinder air-cooled engine, making roughly 6 horsepower, and the drive system was delightfully simple. No clutch pedal at all. A centrifugal clutch engaged automatically as the revs came up, so you throttled up and the little crawler just walked away, with 1 gear forward and 1 in reverse at little more than walking pace. The target customer was the market gardener, growing vegetables and flowers on tight, intensively worked beds where a full-size tractor would crush everything in sight. Those tiny tracks spread the machine's weight beautifully and left the soil in good shape, and it worked. The MG line sold in the thousands and stayed in production through several models into the 1960s. It might look like a toy, but the people who used them treated them like gold. Number 5, the Emerson-Brantingham Big 430. Originally designed by the Gas Traction Company and taken over by Emerson-Brantingham in the early 1910s, the Big 430 was exactly what the name promised: 4 cylinders and brute force. This was a prairie-breaking monster, built to rip open ground that had never seen a plow, with rear steel drive wheels, reportedly standing around 8 feet tall, taller than the man operating it. Depending on configuration, the machine weighed on the order of 10 tons, and it delivered roughly 30 horsepower at the drawbar and about double that on the belt, enough to drag multiple plow bottoms through virgin sod all day long. The strangeness went beyond sheer size. The Big 4 could be fitted with a self-steering attachment, a small guide wheel that ran along in the open furrow and held the tractor on line, freeing the operator to keep an eye on the plows trailing behind. Running one was a full-time education, managing the huge flywheel at startup, working through grease points scattered all over the chassis, and wrestling that mass through headland turns. Smaller, cheaper, more nimble tractors eventually made the giants obsolete, but the Big 430 remains a monument to the era when the answer to every farming problem was simply to build it bigger. Number 4, the International Harvester E340 Turbine Tractor. In 1961, International Harvester built a tractor with a jet engine. That's not a figure of speech. The E340 was an experimental machine powered by a gas turbine developed by Solar Aircraft, a company I owned at the time. The turbine itself reportedly weighed only about 90 pounds, roughly the size of a big coffee can compared to a normal tractor engine, yet it spun at tens of thousands of RPM and screamed like an aircraft taxiing down a runway. All of that was wrapped in a smooth, futuristic fiberglass body that looked less like farm equipment and more like something NASA misplaced. Here's the genuinely forward-looking part. The turbine didn't drive the wheels directly. It powered a hydraulic system, giving the HT340 hydrostatic drive with smooth, infinitely variable speed control and no gear shifts at all. And that idea absolutely did predict the future of farm machinery. The turbine part, not so much. Fuel consumption was brutal, the heat and noise were serious problems, and I never intended to sell it. The HT340 toured fairs and shows as a rolling glimpse of tomorrow, and it made such an impression that it eventually ended up preserved in the Smithsonian's collection. A farm tractor in a national museum with a jet turbine. Bizarre doesn't get much better. Number 3, the Wagner TR14. Before the big four-wheel drive articulated tractors we know today, somebody had to invent the whole idea, and that somebody was the Wagner operation out of Oregon in the mid-1950s. Their TR series put 4 equal-sized wheels under a frame that bent in the middle, with the 2 halves able to oscillate independently over rough ground, so all 4 tires kept their bite. The TR14 sat near the top of that line, powered by a big Cummins diesel, making well over 150 horsepower at a time when the average farm tractor was making around 50. Parked in a yard, it looked like 2 machines sharing a single spine, and plenty of neighbors came by just to stare at it. For big wheat and grain operations out west, the math was irresistible. More power, more traction, wider implements, more acres per hour. Wagner's design worked so well that John Deere, which had no big four-wheel drive of its own yet, later contracted Wagner to build machines under the Deere name. The arrangement reportedly kept Wagner from selling competing models, and when Deere eventually launched its own four-wheel drives, Wagner faded from the scene. It's a rough ending, but the legacy is everywhere, because virtually every giant articulated tractor working today traces its DNA straight back to what Wagner bolted together in the 1950s. Number 2, the Fendt Trisix. Now let's jump forward in time because bizarre didn't end in the 1920s. In 2007, the German manufacturer Fendt rolled a concept machine onto the show floor that looked like somebody had stretched a tractor in Photoshop and forgot to stop. The Trisix had 3 axles and 6 equal-sized wheels, a layout basically unseen on a farm tractor, and it turned heads like nothing else at the show. There was real thinking behind the madness. 6 wheels put far more rubber on the ground than a conventional setup, spreading the machine's weight and cutting soil compaction, which is a genuine enemy of crop yields. Reported output was in the neighborhood of 540 horsepower, and the concept targeted road speeds around 37 miles per hour, so the Trisix was meant to be a true field-to-highway freight train. Both the front and rear axles steered, which allowed surprisingly tight turns for something that long, and even crab-style steering, where the whole machine walks sideways at an angle. The Trisix never made it to production, and Fendt never claimed it would, but plenty of the engineering thinking baked into it echoed through the big machines that followed. Sometimes a tractor exists just to show the world what's possible, and this was one of those. Number 1, the Allis-Chalmers G. Goes to a tractor that looks like somebody built it backwards, because in a sense, they did. Introduced in 1948, the Allis-Chalmers Model G put its little 4-cylinder Continental engine behind the driver, out over the rear wheels, leaving nothing in front of the operator but a bare tubular frame and a completely open view of the ground. No hood, no grille, no engine block to peer around. From the side, it looks less like a tractor and more like a mechanical grasshopper. The strange layout had a very deliberate purpose. The G was aimed at vegetable growers, truck farmers, and nurseries, where the real work is cultivating, and cultivating means watching your implement inch past tender plants all day long, with implements mounted under the belly and that clear sight line straight down between the front wheels. The operator could place a cultivator with almost surgical precision. Output was modest, roughly 10 horsepower at the drawbar, but for delicate row work that was plenty. Tens of thousands were reportedly built through 1955, and the design earned such a loyal following that small growers and homesteaders still hunt down restored examples today, with some even converting them to electric power. Odd looking, yes, but of all the machines on this list, the G might be the purest proof that weird and brilliant often ride the same frame. From steel screws churning through snow to a jet turbine humming in a fiberglass shell, these 15 machines prove that farming has never once been short on imagination. Some of them flopped, some of them changed everything, and every last one of them dared to be different. If this ride through tractor history put a smile on your face, make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on, because there's plenty more strange iron where this came from, and drop a comment below telling me which one of these you'd park in your own shed. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.